Germany once dreamed of greatness, an empire that would rival Britain, France, and Russia. From the unification of 1871, it rose as an industrial powerhouse, confident in its destiny. But within just 3 decades, this proud empire collapsed. Not once, but twice, in 2 of the deadliest wars humanity has ever witnessed. This is the untold story of Germany's rise, ambition, and ultimate downfall, a saga of pride, betrayal, political chaos, and devastating defeat. Chapter 1. Birth of an Empire, 1871 to 1914. In 1871, Otto von Bismarck achieved the unthinkable, the unification of Germany under Prussian leadership. A new empire was born in the heart of Europe, industrializing rapidly and becoming an economic and military powerhouse. Berlin's streets buzzed with newfound pride, and German factories roared with progress. But beneath this triumph lay growing tensions with Europe's old powers. France still burned from its humiliating defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, dreaming of revenge. Britain watched nervously as Germany expanded its navy, challenging its dominance of the seas. Russia, too, viewed Germany's rise with suspicion, forming alliances that slowly encircled the empire. Europe was becoming a ticking time bomb, and Germany stood by the early 20th century. Kaiser Wilhelm II abandoned Bismarck's careful diplomacy, choosing a path of aggression instead. He pushed for colonial expansion, naval supremacy, and greater influence on the world stage. This hunger for dominance strained relations further, creating a fragile balance of power that could be shattered by the smallest spark. Chapter 2. The Spark of War, 1914. That spark came on June 28, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo. What could have remained a regional conflict escalated rapidly. Bound by its alliance with Austria-Hungary, Germany declared war on Russia and France. Within days, Europe was engulfed in flames. Germany's strategy was bold and ambitious, the Schlieffen Plan. It aimed to bypass France's defenses by invading Belgium, striking Paris from the north, and defeating France before Russia could fully mobilize. But this decision drew Britain into the war, turning a continental struggle into a global conflict. The German people believed victory would be swift, but reality was far harsher. Within months, German forces were locked in a brutal stalemate on the Western Front. The dream of a quick war was shattered, replaced by endless trenches, artillery, bombardments, and unimaginable suffering. Chapter 3. Trench Hell and Attrition, 1914-1917. Life in the trenches was a living nightmare. Soldiers endured freezing mud, swarms of rats, and the constant roar of artillery. Gas masks became as essential as rifles, as poison gas filled the air with death. Yet, despite horrific losses, neither side could break the stalemate. Germany fought fiercely on 2 fronts, achieving early victories in the east against Russia, while holding the line in the west. But Britain's naval blockade choked supplies, leaving German cities starving and factories struggling to produce weapons. The people at home began questioning the war's purpose. By 1917, a new threat emerged. The United States entered the war after Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare sank American ships. With fresh troops and resources pouring into the Allied side, Germany's hopes for victory began to fade. Chapter 4. The Fall of the German Empire, 1918. In the spring of 1918, Germany launched its last desperate gamble, the Spring Offensive. For a moment, it seemed victory was within reach as German forces surged deep into Allied territory. But exhausted soldiers and dwindling supplies turned triumph into disaster. The Allies counterattacked with overwhelming strength, aided by American reinforcements. Germany's armies collapsed under relentless pressure. At home, protests erupted as civilians demanded peace and soldiers mutinied against their commanders. By November 11, 1918, the empire was finished. Kaiser Wilhelm II fled into exile, and a fragile democracy, the Weimar Republic, was proclaimed. Germany signed the armistice, but peace came at a devastating cost. Chapter 5: Humiliation and Resentment, 1919. The Treaty of Versailles dealt a crushing blow to Germany's pride and economy. Forced to accept full blame for the war, it lost territories, colonies, and was burdened with crippling reparations. The once mighty empire was reduced to political and financial ruin. Germans called it the Diktat, a dictated peace forced upon them. Millions felt betrayed, and the myth of the Stab, Minthabach, emerged, blaming Jews, communists, and politicians for Germany's defeat. This poisonous narrative would shape the nation's future. Meanwhile, the economy spiraled into chaos. Hyperinflation wiped out savings, breadlines stretched for miles, and desperation grew. Out of this despair, new political movements promised salvation, and among them was the rise of an obscure figure, Adolf Hitler. Chapter 6: The Rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party, 1920 to 1933. Hitler, a failed artist and World War I veteran, tapped into the nation's anger and humiliation. Joining the National Socialist German Workers' Party, he used fiery speeches and relentless propaganda to rally the masses. He promised to restore Germany's pride, rebuild its strength, and avenge Versailles. Through calculated violence, fear, and manipulation, Hitler transformed the Nazis into a formidable political force. Economic collapse and political instability pushed desperate citizens toward radical solutions. By 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Within months, democracy was dismantled, opponents silenced, and a dictatorship established. The Third Reich was born, setting the stage for a new and even deadlier conflict. Chapter 7: The March to War, 1933 to 1939. Hitler wasted no time rearming Germany, openly defying the Treaty of Versailles. He rebuilt the military, revived the economy, and presented himself as the savior of the nation. Crowds cheered as he vowed to reclaim lost glory. In 1938, Germany annexed Austria in the Anschluss, meeting little resistance. Soon after, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, and European powers, desperate to avoid another war, gave in at Munich. But appeasement only emboldened him. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war. Once again, the world was plunged into chaos, and Germany stood at the center of it all. Chapter 8: Blitzkrieg and Early Triumphs, 1939 to 1941. Germany unveiled a new weapon of strategy, Blitzkrieg, lightning war, combining tanks, aircraft, and rapid infantry advances. The Wehrmacht crushed Poland in weeks. Europe watched in shock as Hitler's forces achieved victory after victory. By 1940, France had fallen. German troops marched triumphantly through Paris, while Britain prepared for invasion. The Battle of Britain began, as the Luftwaffe unleashed relentless bombing raids across London and other cities. Frustrated by Britain's resilience, Hitler turned east. In 1941, he launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history, aiming to destroy the Soviet Union and secure Germany's dominance over Europe. Chapter 9: The Turning of the Tide, 1941 to 1943. At first, Operation Barbarossa seemed unstoppable. German armies swept deep into Soviet territory, capturing millions of prisoners and threatening Moscow. But the advance slowed as winter arrived, and the Soviets fought back ferociously. The Battle of Stalingrad became a turning point. Entire armies were surrounded and annihilated. For the first time, Hitler's forces faced defeat on a massive scale. Meanwhile, in North Africa, the Allies pushed back against German advances. In 1941, the United States entered the war after Pearl Harbor. Now, Germany faced a powerful coalition of enemies on multiple fronts. The Reich's days of dominance were numbered. Chapter 10: D-Day and the Fall of the Third Reich, 1944 to 1945. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces launched Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion of Normandy. Tens of thousands of troops stormed the beaches under heavy fire, opening a western front that Germany could not hold back. In the east, the Soviet Red Army advanced relentlessly, reclaiming territory and marching toward Berlin. Hitler refused to surrender, even as his empire collapsed around him. By April 30, 1945, Hitler took his own life in his bunker. 1 week later, Germany signed an unconditional surrender. The Third Reich was finished, and the dream of empire lay in ashes. Chapter 11: A Nation Divided, 1945 to 1949. Germany's defeat left the nation shattered. Its cities were in ruins, millions were dead, and survivors faced hunger and despair. The Allies divided the country into 4 occupation zones, setting the stage for the Cold War. The Nuremberg trials exposed the full horror of Nazi crimes, bringing many of its leaders to justice. The world vowed never to allow such atrocities again, reshaping international law. By 1949, Germany was split into 2 states: West Germany, backed by the Allies, and East Germany, controlled by the Soviet Union. The scars of war ran deep, shaping Europe for generations. Chapter 12: Shadows of Espionage and Resistance, 1939 to 1945. Behind the front lines of World War II, another battle unfolded, a silent war of spies, resistance fighters, and secret missions. German intelligence, the Abwehr, clashed with Allied spy networks, while Britain's MI6 and the US OSS cracked German codes and sabotaged Nazi operations. The famed Enigma machine became a key turning point as Polish, British, and American cryptanalysts unraveled Germany's deepest military secrets. Within Germany, resistance movements quietly took root. The White Rose Group, led by Sophie and Hans Schau, distributed anti-Nazi pamphlets despite knowing execution awaited them. Military officers like Claus von Stauffenberg risked everything in the July 20, 1944 plot to assassinate Hitler and end the war. But the attempt failed, and thousands were executed in its aftermath. The Nazis responded to dissent with ruthless brutality, but the spirit of defiance burned on from the streets of Berlin to occupied Paris. Ordinary people joined underground networks, smuggling information, sabotaging supply lines, and helping Jewish families escape the horrors of the Holocaust. In this shadow war, quiet acts of bravery saved countless lives, and shaped the course of history. Chapter 13: Secret Weapons and Hitler's Obsession, 1943-1945. As defeat loomed, Hitler became obsessed with wonder weapons that could reverse Germany's fortunes. The Nazis invested heavily in advanced technology, producing innovations far ahead of their time. The V-1 flying bomb and V-2 rocket terrorized London, becoming precursors to modern ballistic missiles. German scientists also developed experimental jet fighters, advanced submarines, and chemical weapons that could have changed the war if they had been ready sooner. At Peenemünde, visionary engineer Werner von Braun worked on rocket programs that later shaped space exploration. Yet these technological breakthroughs came at a horrific cost. Thousands of forced laborers perished in underground factories like Mittelwerk, where conditions were brutal beyond imagination. Despite these desperate efforts, Hitler's delusions sealed Germany's fate. He refused to retreat, drained resources on grandiose projects, and clung to fantasies of total victory, even as Allied forces closed in. The so-called miracle weapons arrived too late to save the Reich. Chapter 14: Aftermath. Germany's Reckoning, 1945 to 1955. Germany's surrender marked not just the end of a war, but the beginning of a reckoning. Cities lay in ruins, millions were homeless, and entire generations were lost. The Allied occupation imposed strict control, dismantling the Nazi regime and demilitarizing the nation. Yet, for ordinary Germans, survival became the daily struggle. Hunger, disease, and despair were everywhere. The Nuremberg trials revealed the full scale of Nazi atrocities to the world. Higher-ranking officials were prosecuted for crimes against humanity, setting a precedent for international law. For many Germans, confronting the horrors committed in their name became an unbearable burden, one that reshaped their national identity for decades to come. In the aftermath, the Cold War divided Germany into East and West, pulling it into the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. While West Germany embraced democracy and economic reform, East Germany fell under communist control, setting the stage for decades of separation and tension. Chapter 15: From Defeat to Rebirth, 1955, present. By the mid-1950s, West Germany emerged from the ashes with the Wirtschaftswunder, or economic miracle. Backed by the U.S. Marshall Plan, factories reopened, cities were rebuilt, and living standards soared. West Germany became a cornerstone of Europe's recovery, transforming itself into a stable democracy and global economic power. Meanwhile, East Germany remained trapped under Soviet rule, its people living behind the Berlin Wall, a stark symbol of division. Families were torn apart, and escape attempts often ended in tragedy. For decades, Germany existed as two nations, each shaped by opposing ideologies in a world dominated by nuclear rivalry. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and Germany was finally reunified. Today, Germany stands as a central force in Europe, its journey from empire to ashes to rebirth serving as one of history's most remarkable transformations. Yet the shadows of its past remain a reminder of the cost of ambition, ideology, and war. Germany's path from empire to defeat is a story etched in blood, fire, and resilience. It is the tale of a nation that dreamed of greatness, unleashed destruction on an unprecedented scale, and endured unimaginable suffering, yet ultimately rebuilt itself from ruins. These 15 chapters reveal not just Germany's history, but humanity's capacity for both chaos and renewal. The lessons remain timeless. Unchecked power, fanaticism, and political division can plunge the world into darkness. But even in the darkest hour, the possibility of rebirth endures. History speaks through these echoes, and if we listen, we might avoid repeating the same mistakes.